After the 16-day government shutdown and a bitter battle over the debt ceiling, Congress will still have to grapple with both issues again in the coming months. Is Washington ready for bipartisan compromise, or will the two sides dig their heels in further as the next deadlines approach? Joining us now is Congressman Mike Quigley, who represents parts of Chicago and some northwest suburbs. We should also note that we invited all 6 Republican members of the Illinois congressional delegation to join us this evening, but none of them were available. Congressman Quigley, welcome to Chicago Tonight.
Thank you.
First of all, recent polls show that the standing of Congress is at near all-time lows, if not at an all-time low point. Lessons from the recent shutdown and flirtation with default?
Oh, I think so. I mean, everyone is extraordinarily frustrated, and we understand that. And what's lost, I think, in the news coverage is the fact that there isn't a lot that a lot of members could do about this. This was really 30 or 40 members of the farthest right Republican caucus holding their caucus hostage, and basically all of Congress.
But before we get to that point, is it a failure of Congress as an institution, or you're saying it's a failure of this small group of people?
I think we see a very unique situation here, one we've never seen before, when such a small group is able to control the Republican caucus. When I first got there, Congressman Mark Kirk sat me down and said, everything that gets done here gets done in the middle. And in all fairness, there were a lot of Republicans that we were working with on a bipartisan basis to reach a compromise. They weren't being heard. The bill never got to the floor.
The most recent Pew research shows that the Tea Party movement is now viewed negatively even by Republicans. How would you assess the current strength of the Tea Party movement in Congress?
Disproportionately powerful.
Even now?
Even now. I don't know that we're out of the woods yet because of their extraordinary strength. See, it's not just the Tea Party folks that can have sway. Those Tea Party members, 30 or 40 strong, I think, at the base, they really threaten the majority of the moderate Republicans with Tea Party primaries. They say if Senator Lugar can lose in Indiana, seen as a moderate, well, then you can too. So they bring everybody to the right out of fear. So that's why they have disproportionate power. And they could still wield that with the second round.
Do you expect them to?
I expect them to try. The question is, will Speaker Boehner stand firm and go along with what will probably end up being a Senate-controlled, compromised long-term budget bill?
Reports are that Speaker Boehner's job appears to be secure. Do you agree?
No.
You do not?
I was talking to a couple members of the Tea Party on the floor just before the government shutdown took place. And I said in just a very normal fashion, how is the Speaker going to handle this? And they said almost dismissively, he has nothing to do with this, right? It's not tail wagging the dog. This is really the tip of the dog's tail wagging the body politic. And the Speaker has to walk a fine line. If he had put what we call a clean CR, a funding mechanism,
continuing resolution.
Right, a continuing budget resolution on the floor, he wouldn't have been the Speaker the next day, according to the Tea Party people.
What was your leadership telling you during the shutdown? Just hang in there, we're going to win. What were they saying to you? What was Nancy Pelosi and leadership saying?
I think they were saying stay the course, because remember the first request that was made, the first demand, we're going to shut down government unless you defund the health care law. You know, that wasn't something that anyone was going to go along with. So I think they were saying stay the course, let's come off as the reasonable middle ground alternative. The Democrats were willing to take a much lower figure. In the end, the Republicans could have declared victory at the beginning. Let's remember that figure we approved was $986 billion, which is below the original Ryan budget. It was below Simpson-Bowles. This was a low number, 8% across the board. It was meeting our fiscal responsibilities. They just wanted too much.
Only Randy Hultgren voted no in the Illinois congressional delegation against the deal reopening the government. What is the relationship within the Illinois delegation? How would you describe it?
Actually, with most of the members, Democrat, Republican, it's very cordial. On a day-to-day basis, Congressman Schock, for example, will often get on bills that we work with. Senator Kirk came to the Senate and immediately started working on a bicameral, bipartisan basis on independence and autonomy and reform measures. It's actually been a pleasure on the most part. Again, it's not the moderate Republicans that have made this difficult. If that was all that was in Congress, I believe we can reach an accord on most of these matters and get to the most serious issues we haven't addressed.
How about the deadline of December 13th for coming up with a deal for federal tax and spending? Is there another standoff likely, do you think?
I think there's enough time to get a big deal done.
Really?
What I'm hearing is that there may be a compromise middle ground that's still better than the standoff, and that's a one-year deal that's pretty responsible. What we need in the end is a long-term budget deal, something like Simpson-Bowles was proposed, with more realistic figures. Do we get to Simpson-Bowles? I doubt it. Do we get to a one-year deal that's pretty reasonable? Maybe. Are we likely to be a standoff at the edge? It really depends, again, on how the Speaker handles the far right.
Did the Speaker have any choice in how he handled the far right?
It really depends on how you view what was happening inside the caucus.
For example, one theory is that the Speaker wanted the Tea Party to do its thing, realize that that strategy was not successful, so that they will have been chastened the next time around.
I think that's what he tried to do at the beginning as well. He had a proposal that said, okay, we're going to defund Obamacare, and when the Senate passes their version, they'll strip that out, and it'll come back, and you will have appeased your far-right base. Well, that didn't work. So you would think that the polling and everything else that's being discussed about how bad this was would discourage them. But we're seeing right now it's really a rallying cry, that they're actually trying to threaten their own moderate members.
The midterms are approaching. Polls show that Republicans have lost quite a bit of support. Prospects for the Democrats taking the House?
We're a year out, so I always tell folks it's way too early. But I think the danger for Republicans is, if this happens again, and they don't get to other matters like immigration reform, they could lose the House despite the fact that they have overwhelming majorities in a lot of those districts because of how the maps were drawn nationally.
And what are the prospects for a farm bill and immigration reform?
I think that they're good if we can ever get past this point. If we can ever get past this and get back to budgeting, authorizing, and appropriating in a normal fashion, then the Senate bill on immigration reform has a chance. Do I think that the far right will try to skew that as well and take away the important provisions? Sure. But we can't get to square one unless we get past this impasse.
How about the Affordable Care Act? Because all the initial reports appear to suggest that it's been just a mess. What are you hearing from the administration in terms of its ability to fix things?
Well, I think the administration was unhappy about how the implementation started, but just on the website aspect. Let's remember this encompasses a very large, important bill. Most of the calls I'm getting from constituents aren't about getting on the website. It's about what this bill does. This is really the prelude to a lifetime of important changes. And most of my constituents understand what I understand, and that is, let's remember where we were before this. 47 million Americans without health care insurance. You could be knocked off for pre-existing conditions. There were caps. A lot of benefits in this bill for senior citizens and couples with kids right out of college. So by and large, I think it's still positive. And let's remember what's most intriguing here is the fact that there's so much interest is what's causing the problems. What people were anticipating was this was going to be unpopular. But there are so many people who need health care, it's created the problem at the initial stages. So much demand. Let's
talk about something very local. As you know, a new runway has opened at O'Hare. Some of your constituents say you have been insufficiently responsive to their concerns about more noise being created by these new traffic patterns. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I can't speak for what happened with the O'Hare expansion deal before I became their congressman. I started representing O'Hare in January of this year, and since that time, my staff and I have been very diligent to meet as often as we possibly can with individuals, groups, and community organizations. In the end, what we're doing is pushing for reducing the decibel level so that there can be a dramatic increase in soundproofing for homes and businesses and schools, as well as distributing the burden on all those runways. O'Hare's expansion is absolutely critical. It is the economic engine for the region, but I think it's fair and the constituents have a point, and I'm, I think, leading that fight to distribute that runway traffic as evenly as possible so that one neighborhood doesn't get hit as much as any other.
Congressman Mike Quigley, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.